At 6:12 a.m., I watched a man in a reflective vest hammer a bright green stake into my pasture like he owned the place. Steam rose from my coffee as my cattle lifted their heads in unison, ears flicking, eyes fixed on the stranger. That was the exact moment I knew this wasn't a mistake, it was a declaration of war. I've worked this land for 30 years. My father worked it before me. 200 acres of open pasture, rolling hills, fences repaired by hand, and cattle that respond to my truck engine like it's a dinner bell. It's not a hobby farm. It's not scenic decoration. It's active cattle land, clearly marked, registered, insured, and taxed as such. Or at least it was, until the HOA next door decided my pasture was the perfect place for a community enhancement. The letter arrived 3 weeks earlier, slipped into my mailbox like a bad joke. Notice of Community Improvement Project, it read, full of cheerful language about wellness, family-friendly spaces, and a new bike path to connect the subdivision to the river trail. The map showed a thin gray line cutting clean through the southern edge of my pasture. I laughed out loud. Then I read it again. Then I called the number. The woman on the phone introduced herself as Brenda, the HOA vice president, and spoke to me slowly, like I was confused. She explained that the land had been unused for years, and that the HOA had already voted. When I told her there were 80 head of cattle grazing on that unused land, she paused, then said, well, they'll just have to adjust. I told her no. Clear. Simple. No. 2 days later, I got an email saying construction would proceed as scheduled. I called a lawyer. He sent a cease and desist. The HOA replied with a PDF full of legal language and highlighted sections about easements, community benefit, and presumed abandonment. They claimed the land had no visible activity. Apparently, cattle don't count as visible activity if you don't want them to. And then, one morning, the stakes appeared. Surveyors. Orange spray paint. A bulldozer parked just beyond my fence line. They didn't even knock. I drove out to the pasture and told the crew to stop. The foreman shrugged and said he was just following orders. I called the county. The county said it was a civil matter. I called the HOA again. Brenda told me to relax and enjoy the fact that my property value was about to go up. By the end of the week, the fence was cut. They built a smooth, paved bike path straight through the heart of my grazing land. Signs popped up overnight. Share the trail. Slow. Children. Smile. You're healthy. My cattle watched it all, confused and restless. The first weekend it opened, the neighborhood poured in. Cyclists in neon spandex. Parents with strollers. Joggers with earbuds. None of them looked at the cattle. None of them read the small, weathered signs that said private property, active livestock. Then a golden retriever ran screaming across the pasture, leash dragging behind it. That's when the trouble started. Cows are prey animals. You introduce strange movement, loud noises, barking dogs, and suddenly you've got 80,000 pounds of muscle deciding it doesn't like surprises. One steer charged the fence line. Another kicked up dirt and snorted. A mother separated from her calf panicked. I got calls that afternoon. Angry ones. A woman accused me of weaponizing animals. Another said my cows were aggressive and unsafe. Someone threatened to call animal control. Someone else already had. On Monday, I received a formal complaint from the HOA demanding I secure my livestock away from the bike path immediately. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and pulled out the thick binder I keep for bad days. Deeds, surveys, agricultural zoning permits, livestock liability laws. Right there, in black and white, was the truth they'd ignored. Under state law, anyone entering active cattle land without permission assumes all risk. And any obstruction placed without consent is the responsibility of the party who placed it. They didn't just trespass. They built an attractive nuisance in the middle of it. I stopped calling. I stopped arguing. I let the pasture do the talking. I opened the internal gates and rotated the herd so the most active group grazed right along the bike path. I scheduled routine veterinary checks during peak hours. I spread feed near the trail so the cattle clustered close, massive and unmoving. I put up new signs, bigger ones, quoting the law verbatim. 3 days later, a cyclist wiped out when a cow shifted her weight and spooked his bike. No contact. No charge. Just fear and a cracked helmet. The HOA called an emergency meeting. Brenda stood at the front of the community hall, red-faced, demanding that I remove the cows. I showed up with my lawyer and a projector. We displayed photos of the cut fence, copies of the cease and desist, and the state statutes they'd violated. Then my lawyer calmly explained that every injury, every complaint, Every incident exposed the HOA to catastrophic liability. Someone asked why the path was even there. Silence followed. The vote to close the bike path passed unanimously. The next week, contractors returned, not to build, but to tear it out. Asphalt peeled away. Signs vanished. The fence was repaired, stronger than before, on the HOA's dime. I sent them the invoice for pasture restoration and lost grazing time. They paid it. Now, when I drive the fence line in the mornings, there's nothing but grass, hoofprints, and the quiet rhythm of cattle doing what they've always done. The HOA planted a small plaque near the subdivision entrance that reads, "Please respect working farmland." Brenda doesn't wave anymore, and every time I hear a cyclist's bell on the distant river trail, I smile, because this land remembers who it belongs to. A tense dawn scene with a rancher holding coffee, watching construction workers stake a bike path in a misty cattle pasture. Bulldozers cutting through a rural pasture while cows stand behind a broken fence, looking alert and uneasy. A colorful suburban HOA bike path running directly through grazing cattle land with warning signs ignored. A chaotic moment of cyclists and joggers startled as large cows cluster near the paved path. A golden retriever running loose across a pasture as cattle react nervously in the background. An angry HOA meeting in a community hall with residents arguing and a confident rancher standing calmly. A dramatic legal presentation with land deeds and laws projected on a screen during the HOA meeting. Contractors removing a bike path and repairing fences while cattle graze nearby. A peaceful sunset over restored pastureland with cows grazing and no path in sight. A final quiet ranch morning with a rancher driving along a fence line, satisfied and victorious.